When it comes to laptops, hardware is the most important thing, and especially gaming laptops, because the very first thing that people put into consideration is the CPU and the GPU, and whatever else is mostly secondary. For people that only care about the CPU and GPU, there are always cheaper options with more and more plastic materials and a bright red color scheme to go with it. For Omen, they decided to do a rebrand and redesign for the laptops and hardware in general. They now have a gradient logo, it's a lot more cleaner and subdued, and it's supposed to be more modern and chic. And honestly, when it comes to this laptop, it's the cheapest, nice looking gaming laptop to me. Now there is the Razer Blade, which is also a very nice, sleek, clean looking laptop, but it costs considerably more to get into. As the HP Omen 15 is mostly made of metal and it feels very premium and it just looks nice and doesn't look gaudy versus other gaming laptops. The thickness of the Omen though is very deceiving. They have a tapered end for the lid and they've done it in such a way where it seems like it's a lot more thinner of a laptop than it is. Now, make no mistake, it is a heavy laptop, so around 3 or 4 pounds, and thankfully there is ports galore to go with that. You have 2 full-size USB 3 ports, a barrel plug for power, a full-size HDMI port, Ethernet port, also a USB-C port, also a Thunderbolt 2 port, and a full-size SD card, and also an aux jack on top of that for your headphones. Literally everything that you can need in a laptop, probably. Now, one of the most quintessential things of a laptop, which again varies for model to model, is the screen. Now, it isn't a bezel-less, super chic modern display. It's a typical 16:9 ratio display, which is fairly bright outside and it looks really good. Has a matte finish to it, which helps for outdoor use. And my model is the 300 Hz model. The refresh rate of the screen just makes everything seem so much faster and responsive. It's a must-have on a laptop, really. But when you look to the screen, to the keyboard, you'll notice some grills in a line right there. And typically for HP laptops, that usually means is a big speaker grill, and that's what I was hoping for, and I expected. However, the speakers are actually on the bottom on the sides that are tapered in. Now, they don't sound terrible, but they don't sound great either. They're pretty clear and clean and crisp, and they have some decent bass, but they're not nearly as good as the MacBook Pro. But admittedly, for the price, I can't complain because these sound a lot better than a lot of other game laptops like the Acer Nitro. Another thing that this has over those cheap laptops like the Acer Nitro and the Dell G5, for example, is the keyboard and trackpad. Now, the keyboard itself is membrane. It isn't a semi-mechanical keyboard like the old Alienwares used to use, but it is very responsive and it is very stable. It's not wobbly and it has a good amount of travel to make it feel like a real solid click. It's very satisfying. Now, it only has 4-zone RGB, or really 3-zone RGB with WASD, RGB lights standard with individually lit keys optional, but honestly, the base keyboard lighting spec is plenty enough for me, and I think it looks good, as I typically go for just a red, white, and blue keyboard scheme. The trackpad itself, you kind of forget about. Now, it's a big trackpad in the middle. It is very responsive. It does every gesture very well, and you just forget that it's there, which is the highest praise for a trackpad. A lot of the times for trackpads on gaming laptops, they either have individual keys for the left and right click, or they're just not responsive and they don't click right, they don't do the right click or left click right, and overall, it's just not a good experience on that plastic pad. This seems to be, or has to be really, a glass pad because it feels great and it using Windows Precision drivers makes it really smooth. Now for the 2020 model and 2021 probably, the HP Omen 15 is categorized in 2 categories. The HP Omen 15T and the HP Omen 15Z. The 15T means it's Intel and the 15Z means it's Ryzen. I went with Intel with my unit. It's a 10th generation i7. And my use case is mainly productivity based. And honestly, I probably would have been a little better off with Ryzen. But for me, the price was $100 cheaper. And for legacy programs, for engineering, Intel seems to have a lot more refinement and support. But mind you, if you do go for Ryzen, more and more support's coming. It's just legacy support for software that Intel does a little bit better on, but it is a minute difference, and an i7 is still a super powerful and super capable processor, which unfortunately, when it comes to Intel's processor, it's mainly the weird naming scheme and the lack of brand faith that really makes a lot of people shy away from Intel nowadays. But the i7 in this laptop, or the i7 11th generation and new laptops coming out are still very solid and head-to-head competitive with Ryzen's offerings. Now the problem with any gaming laptop is the cooling, because you mostly have it on your lap or on your bed or weird use case scenarios. And this has a fan for the CPU and GPU, which is really required for an RTX 2060 like mine is. And this thing performs very well. I use lighter games like League of Legends and World of Warcraft, so I didn't have any thermal throttling issues. And programs like SolidWorks also really didn't have much of hiccups that were out of the norm for this laptop. It really holds its own with its cooling solution. And in between the screen and the keyboard, that grill right there is for an intake, and the bottom grills are for exhaust, which it does really well with. One thing that really sucks about gaming laptops though, in general for any gaming laptop, is the battery life. Now this is no exception. This has a 71 watt-hour battery, as you can see when I'm taking it apart. The battery, compared to the size of the game laptop itself, is pretty big, and most laptops don't have this battery to size ratio. But despite that battery to size ratio, it still uses very powerful hardware. You're at least running a 1650 or RTX 2060 or whatever the entry-level GTX is going to be for the next generation, for the 3090 and 3080s and so on and so forth. So the battery life has been consistently about 4 hours for me, but I always, and I mean always, use a lot of multitasking. A lot of tabs open, a lot of software. The lowest stuff I run is Microsoft Excel and big spreadsheets. The most intensive things are video games and SolidWorks. When you do decide to tear this down to upgrade it, first off, taking off the back panel is easy. The screws are visible and it's separated enough. They don't use too many. It's very straightforward and it's not stressful, thankfully. Second off though, the RAM is not soldered on, so you can upgrade it in the future, which is great. Another thing that's upgradable is the storage itself, using two M.2 slots for the laptop itself. Mine came with 512 gigabyte SSD standard, so it only occupied one of those slots, so I can add another one whenever I feel like it. So as long as you option this thing right, you can upgrade this laptop and keep it for a very long time. The worst thing I could say about laptops like this is that it is still a gaming laptop. The battery life is not exceptional. And honestly, there are some big drawbacks to sucking that much power. I mean, it's already 3 or 4 pounds. Sure, that's not terrible. You can live with that in your bag for your backpack. But you're probably going to bring the power brick. And the power brick is massive and it's heavy in its own right. Now, it doesn't help that the battery life is only about 4 hours, and even when you're not using the dedicated GPU, the battery life isn't that stellar. You may be able to squeeze out another hour out of it, but if you're using this as a workhorse laptop, you are going to bring that power brick with you, which adds additional bulk and weight. However, the Omen 15 is an exceptionally good gaming laptop. Now, it's not a Razer Blade, but it is a lot cheaper, and it is a lot more reliable than one of those. And unlike an Acer Nitro or a Dell G5, it's a lot more modern and chic, using just a black metal construction with a super solid trackpad and a super solid keyboard, which just feels great to my fingers, I guess. So with a starting price of just $1,080, this makes this a good budget gaming laptop, yet it feels premium. It feels just as premium as MSI's more thin and light offerings, yet it is substantially cheaper and it's not that much thicker. So overall, if you're looking for a powerhouse laptop to do whatever you need it to do, then the HP Omen 15 is a good place to look. Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing if you liked the video. I have a bunch more videos coming up. Laptops is not something I normally do because, well, they're expensive and even I have to finance them. So I have a bunch of reviews about headphones, bands, another smartphone coming up, and much more. Thank you for watching. Peace.